This episode of the Fiction Writers Podcast is brought to you by How to Write a Novel That Sells. Do you dream of writing a best-selling fiction novel? With the right tools, you could get there sooner than you think. Visit www.howtowriteanovelthatsells.com and unlock the secrets to writing compelling fiction taught by international best-selling author Lana McAra. Welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana McAra, where you will discover tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Here you'll find new energy, new perspectives, new resources, and new ideas that will spark your creativity into a blaze of brilliance. It's easier than you think. Be sure you visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, get out your notebook, tune in, and let's get started.
Making sure that you have your rights secured is so important when you're writing. That's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Lana McAra, and welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast, tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Today, I'm so delighted to welcome to our podcast, Elissa Hecker. As a go-to general counsel for small businesses, solopreneurs, and entrepreneurs, in their legal and business affairs across the U.S., she guides her clients through strategic thought processes, how to negotiate from a position of strength, protect your brand and intellectual property, set up legal infrastructure to protect from, so you're protected in your contracts, licensing, digital issues, trademarks, copyrights, and work on independent contractor employee issues, among other things. She also practices in the field of entertainment, arts, and book publishing, and is a repeat super lawyer, top lawyers, and best lawyers in America. Welcome, Elissa.
Thank you. I love the unputdownable. I think that's fabulous.
Thank you so much. That came from a book review somebody did for me and put #unputdownable. I went, oh, I love it. I'm going to keep that. So, yeah, that's how it happened. So tell me, how did you get started doing what you're doing now?
In general, I've been a lawyer for a long time. I grew up as a dancer and choreographer, and my father was one of the first attorneys in the copyright bar, and he represented a lot of visual artists, models. And I grew up photographers. I grew up surrounded by artists. They were the coolest people. He loved what he did. I worked for him all those years, and I knew that I was not going to be a dancer for my vocation. So I figured I'd love to work with folks in the arts and entertainment and the creative industries, because I could help them do what they do best and understand where they're coming from.
That is such a great growing up time to be among people, creative people.
I also saw my dad love what he was doing, and that was really important. And I love being a lawyer, which is not something you hear often, but it's really because of my clients.
Yes, yes. And so the focus on the arts came from that. Is that right?
The focus on the arts came from that. Also, the fact that my parents raised me going to museums, appreciating. I was in the music business for a long time too, just appreciating creativity and what the arts brings to life, where I'm a big advocate of STEAM in school, which is the STEM subjects plus the art, because you need to have the full brain, the full everything in order to really appreciate life. And there was no doubt I was going to be doing something with the arts. That helps me breathe.
Yes, helps me breathe. I love that. Yes. I know exactly what you mean. I worked in corporate for a very short time, and every time I entered the building, I felt like I couldn't breathe.
Like, why? Why? What are you putting out in the world? Yeah, it's tough.
Yes, it is. So we talk about fiction here, and the people watching us are fiction and listening, fiction writers. So what would be one of the first things that a fiction writer should think about even before they're published?
It's a very good question. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you who are writing, because reading is one of my most favorite things to do and to escape into. And I know it's a hard job sometimes and can be lonely. So thank you. I'd say There are a few things. One of the primary things would be if you're taking a storyline based on something that's happening in real life, to be careful. Sometimes there are issues with right of privacy and right of publicity, and this happens much more in nonfiction, but if it's a recognizable story and it could possibly affect individuals personally or professionally, there may be some issues. So definitely fictionalize. And I don't know in terms of, I can speak to the publishing agreement and the negotiations, but I don't want to tell authors what they should be thinking about as they're starting their writing process, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of authors are concerned about, even sharing in a critique group or
Got it.
getting an editor.
Yes. Okay, that's definitely helpful. When you work with an editor, there's usually some kind of understanding of this is happening for this particular thing. Depending on the editor, if you know the editor, if this is a reputable editor, if someone you're just meeting, you might want to have a non-disclosure agreement to say going in, this is mine, these are my ideas, these are my protected intellectual property. What I'm going to share with you is only for the sole purpose of perhaps working together on this, and you cannot use this for any other way. And that's, depending on the circumstance, it's good to have. Sometimes you don't need it. And then, sharing on forums, as you're saying, very often creatives do share online and in forums, and there are certain ones that are not protectable. They're called Cinefair, like star-crossed lovers, for example. You cannot protect that. That is something that can be used over and over again, but how you express that can be protected. So perhaps if you're putting out ideas, that's one thing. But if you're actually sending out your writing, very often what I would recommend is saying, this is my copyright. This is my intellectual property. You're on notice. It doesn't necessarily give you the protection it would if you were registered with the Copyright Office, but there's notice saying, this is mine. I created them. This is a fixed, tangible medium, which is an important thing in copyright, and that we have a record. So if I see in one of your books that you've used my language or something similar, we have an issue. Just to be aware. And also, same thing, if you see something else that someone else has posted, but you're like, ooh, that would be great in my work, be careful. And, if you want to quote, you can ask for permission or things like that, but you never want to copy someone else's either.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sure. Yes. So when it comes to contracts, I know contracts are specific, but is there anything that you could give us that would be like a rule of thumb?
That's really broad. So contracts in terms of publishing contracts, collaboration agreements, things like that.
Publishing contract.
Yeah. So you have your traditional book publishers, who are the big ones. You have hybrid publishers. You have self-publishers. All of those agreements are negotiable. Just so you know, that's the first thing going in. Some authors have greater negotiating powers and positions than others. First-time authors very rarely have negotiating positions unless you have really good agents. But there's always room to wiggle. So when you're starting to look at a publishing agreement, and the first thing I always tell my author clients is, think about what you want and think about what you don't want, which is very important, even before you look at the agreement. What is something that you really want to have in there, and what stuff that you may not want to have in there? What's going on in your personal life? Because there are certain publishing agreements that will give you an advance and will also give you very specific deadlines. Are those deadlines worth that advance? Or do you have to push other work away? Or are there, do you have a sick parent you have to take care of, and you know that you're not going to be able to do your best? So things like that are good to look for. I've had some clients who, against my best advice, or they've done it and then come to me afterwards, who just signed at the first opportunity because they think that may be the only opportunity that they have for this project. And one of the things I tell my clients too is it's okay to walk away if it's not a good deal. If it's not going to be worth your time and it's a very little bit of money, you don't have to take that deal. There will be someone else interested. And then when you look at the agreements, there are, what are the territories? Do you want it just English, North America, where you can limit it? What is the length of the agreement? Very often there's the rights clause. What are you retaining and what are you giving away? The traditional publishers always say film, television, theater, radio. I mean, it goes back to the old time radio shows. You don't have to grant that. Or if you want to grant that, ask for more money. Because very often what's happening is unless you have a well-established relationship with this publisher where you know what the publisher is going to do, it's good to have the publisher represent you for the book and possibly the audiobook and things like that. Excuse me, but not necessarily for the other things because you're kind of dating. You want to see how they do. You want to see what they do for you. And a book publisher is not always the best one to go out and get you a movie deal or negotiate. And they will be tied to these products and these properties for a long time. So I would say that's a big deal. Let me see, I have some notes. Yeah, just know that there are things that you can, and you can always go back and ask questions. And very often in the negotiations, I see with my adversaries a lot from the publishing companies. They're like, well, no, we can't change that because we've never done that before. It's the first time for everything. Why not? You know, it can never hurt to ask. I always say ask for the moon, but know where you'll settle in between the earth and the moon. Know what works for you, and know your value is really important. Also, know you're putting this work in. So for like the hybrid publishing or the self-publishing, when you're paying money very often to do it, also know you can negotiate some of those. You can work around the packages. Some of the self-publishing or the hybrid publishing options are fantastic. Some are crooks. Like you really do your research also in terms of where you're going to be. Get references. Also find out what the publishers are doing for you, because the publishers very often will ask a lot from you and they'll say, we'll do marketing. What does that mean? Have that defined in the contract. You will be doing X, Y, and Z because I'm paying you this money and we're going to be doing this together. The little things like that to really think about what's happening when you're doing all the work and you're paying money to be published. Will you be getting X number of copies of books that you can then take with you and give away or possibly resell? Or what happens if there's overage? Like, do they destroy them? Do you have to buy them back? What happens if there's some in the factory? So I think those are things on top of the top of my head that are some important things to think about.
Yes, it's so important to be aware of the nuances, the small details, because at the beginning, it doesn't feel like that's all that important. But at the end, when you are the one getting the royalty check or not getting it, it becomes critically important.
Yeah. Oh, that's another one. Thinking of royalties, and I'm glad you brought that up. You can have an acceleration clause in your agreement, which means X number of books sell, you're getting X number of royalties. Another 500, 1,000, 10,000, depending sell, you get a bump up on royalties. Then another one. So you can have that built in to the contract as well.
Yes, that's great. Once they get their own expenses covered, then you can get more.
Yes.
On the percentages.
So you get the advance, which is then recoupable, which means that gets paid back through their expenses. But then you get royalties on the back end, which means as the books sell, once the advance is recouped, you get more. You get your next amount of money. Sometimes authors never see that, but it depends on how you negotiate it. If you have a really high advance, it takes longer to get to the royalty stream. If you have a lower advance and a good publisher who will get it out there, you'll get to the royalty stream quicker.
Yes. All publishers are definitely not created equal. And do you ever negotiate anything around distribution, where they're going to put it?
Yeah, you can have that in the agreement too. Or negotiate, or also ask to clarify. What do they do? How do they distribute? Rather than just saying distribution, what does that mean? And it's always good. And then to get as specific as possible in certain clauses is beneficial to an author.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything else about the publishing agreement that you can think of that would be important to know?
Read it and have a lawyer review it. because there are a lot of things that goes to like, you don't know what you don't know. So, and also don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't understand it, it's okay to ask questions. A lot of authors feel like they should know, or it's just legalese, but every single word counts. And I think it's really important to have a lawyer or ask the questions to the publisher, things like that also, to really understand. And then if you need clarifications, again, you may want to put things in the contract or change things because it doesn't work for you.
Yes. Yes. I've been through, Chris, I have a lot of books out there, and been through a lot of different contracts with different publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helps to talk to someone with experience in the book world to know what is usually done.
Yeah. And
for example,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For example, bookstores pay 40% discount on the cover price. They get a 40% discount.
Mm-hmm.
So they only pay 60% of the cover price. If you know that, then when the publisher has it in the contract, you pay 70%. As the author, you pay 70%. So I just pushed back and said, bookstores pay 60%. Why am I paying 70%? Mm-hmm. And they immediately gave me 60%.
The more you know, the better negotiator you will be. Absolutely.
Yes. So let's move on to collaboration. What can be some of the pitfalls of collaborating with another author, co-authoring a book together?
There are always pitfalls when you're working with other people. So one of the biggest one is who owns the copyright? Is this a joint copyright? What is the intention behind it? And often a collaboration, if it's co-authors versus an author and an illustrator, very often you'll have one agreement with the publisher as opposed to two separate ones. So you also have to agree to the terms that are in the publishing agreement and know that that's what you're getting down the line. Because the publishing house is getting that one book, which is that one property, and it's not going to want to necessarily negotiate twice. And if you're the joint copyright owners, then it can be one agreement. So a lot of it is like, although this is a creative property, it's like any kind of contract. And a contract is a meeting of the minds. It's what are we doing together? What is our intention? What do we want to have come out of it? What are your obligations? What are my obligations? How do we work together? How do we pick an editor? What happens if there's a disagreement? All of those things should be included in this agreement. What happens if someone gets sick? What happens if one of them dies? Like, these are all things to think about going into a project together.
Yes, it's really important because if you're, say, 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through a book and one person becomes incapacitated in some form, then what?
Or wants to step away. What happens then? That's, you're relying on each other. All of this stuff can be laid out in a contract. Also, who gets the royalties? Is it you? Are you assigning them to someone? If someone dies, for example, does that person's estate get them? You can lay that all out in an agreement as well.
Yes. I did a collaboration years ago, and the publisher agreed to send each of us a separate check, 50-50, which made it better than having to constantly be sending money to somebody else, either one of us, right?
That complicates everything. You're co-authors, so that makes perfect sense to ask for them.
Yes, exactly.
Nowadays, you can ask for direct deposit, and you don't have to even worry about check.
Right. Sometimes I still have a publisher that wants to send a check.
Listen, money is money, no matter in what form.
Yeah. You're really glad to get the check. Yes. So talk a little bit about copyrights and trademarks and those topics, which comes about when you are using your material in different ways than a book. If you're repurposing your material.
Yes. So copyright and trademark and patent are your three intellectual properties in the United States, primarily. What happens is a copyright owner who creates an original work that's fixed in a tangible medium. So that's the, you can't protect ideas portion, but you can protect if it's, when you write it down, that's fixed and it has to be original. It can't be like a list of ingredients. It can't be like a phone book. There has to be some originality built into that. Once you create something that falls under that, description, then you have a protectable work. And you want to, if you want to protect it, I'm sorry, from being copied, you can register with the U.S. Copyright Office, which is actually very user-friendly for a bureaucratic governmental organization. And you put in who's the original author, who's the claimant, who would be the copyright owner, what it is, and then you put up a deposit copy, which is a copy of what you're doing electronically, and you can get a copyright registration form. Once you're protected and registered, you have the right, if someone infringes on your work, which means takes it without permission, you can sue. You can't sue. You can't bring a federal copyright case unless you have a registered work. You can also get what's called statutory damages versus actual damages, which means you can get, like, say, $150,000 per infringement rather than $10 of what it costs the infringer. And you can, if you win, you can get attorney's fees. So it's really important to protect your copyright. And the copyright is also what you assign to the publisher for the life of the work that the publisher controls the book. And then the publisher registers that portion with the Copyright Office as well. When you have a trademark, that's really the protection of your brand. So you cannot trademark the title of a book, but you can trademark a series name. So like the Harry Potter series or things like that, that can be protected in the Patent and Trademark Office because both consumers they call them consumers. Is there a likelihood of consumer confusion that something comes from somewhere? Will know that when they see the Harry Potter brand, they're getting something very specific from it. So that's the trademark would be like your Nike swoosh, the Harry Potter, the M for McDonald's. You know what's emanating from that brand, which is why one book title is not protectable like that. You also can have your logo. If you have a logo that you want to have with your book series, that can be protected in addition to the words. And a logo, which is usually some kind of design with or without words, is also entitled to copyright protection. So you can have double protection over that.
Mm. Wow, that is so interesting. So
much fun.
Yeah. I didn't know that a series title could be trademarked.
Yes, absolutely.
So does that include the way it is on the cover, the design of it on the cover, or is it just the name?
Well, you're not protecting the design, you're protecting the mark itself. So it could be words, or it could be, like I said, like a design. It could be like a circle with something that's on every one of the books that indicates this is part of this series. I mean, you could look at Scholastic books and see, like, there are certain things that they have on their series and things like that. That is protectable. The title of the book itself is not, and the cover design is protectable by copyright, but not by trademark.
Okay. So they overlap a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Yes, that is correct. And then there's one other thing you had asked about in terms of the rights that are granted. As a copyright owner, you become the owner of what we call a bundle of rights, if you can think of it like a pizza or a pie. So you have the right for distribution, you have the rights you basically have the right to do anything with it or stop others from using it. So you can grant within that pie the right to publish the book, the right to have it used in movies, the right to have it used in television, the right to use that radio, the right to have it transcribed into something else, or for a fee, or you don't have to, you could do it gratis, or you retain those rights and you only do the right to publish or the right to audiobooks. They're all owned by the copyright owner. And if you retain it or hold back your rights, you then have the ability to either license exclusively or not exclusively someone else to do the theater version or the radio version or the script version that's separate and distinct from your publishing agreement. So those are separate agreements, and those are separate and those are separate revenue streams.
So that is a traditional publisher that wants the rights.
Yes.
But what about a hybrid publisher?
Sometimes they want the rights too, and I immediately cross out all of those because there's no reason for a hybrid publisher to have those rights unless they're absolutely well known to be able to go out and get good deals and things like that. And again, there are some hybrid and self-publishing companies that are good at certain things, but I would not think that that would be a specialty of a hybrid publisher.
So hybrid publishers generally let the author keep the rights.
I mean, it's all part of the negotiation.
Yes.
Very often they'll just ask for everything, and it's up to you to take it out. So be aware of what's in there, because they even may just ask for a few of them, but just know that you have the right to say no. Or you have the right to say, yes, you can have it, but then I pay less, or you pay more, or I get a higher royalty, things like that.
Right. Yeah, it's so important to realize that you have control over what you give away and what you keep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there are a couple of other things I was thinking of. If you're going to be quoting lyrics or from other works that are currently under copyright. So if something's in the public domain that's anything created prior to 1928, you can use that. Like, I know, the original Steamboat Willie just went into, and Winnie the Pooh, the original ones just went into the public domain. That doesn't mean you can use the newer versions, but you can use things from the older versions. Sherlock Holmes, there are certain things, but anything that's currently protected under copyright, you want to license, you want to get permission to use, and then usually you need to credit them as part of the license. Again, licenses could be gratis, which means they're free, or you may have to pay a fee to do that. So that's something to consider too. Or if you're going to quote from someone else's book, like say one of your characters is reading one of your favorite books and it's currently under copyright, you should reach out to that author to say, hey, I'd like to license this particular passage.
Yeah, really great. Alyssa, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Also, tell us how to get in touch with you.
One more thing I'd like to share when we're talking about this, if you're using photographs or illustrations that are not yours and you're taking them from other places and you don't have an agreement with an illustrator or a photographer, if those works are in copyright, you also must license them. You can't just take them because you saw them in the newspaper or you really liked it from a book. Very often books will include someone's walking through the Museum of Modern Art, for example, and there's a painting and they take a picture of that. You cannot use that painting without permission because the intellectual property, the copyright in that, belongs to the artist who created that. And you have to ask permission to have that in your book. So little things like that, in addition to the words, are very important to remember. And then if you want to get in touch with me, my website is eheckeresq.com. That's my name, Elissa Hecker, eheckeresq.com. And my email address is eheckeresq@eheckeresq.com, which is long, but not that hard.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm riveted. I'm going to stop listening.
I love this stuff. So I'm always happy to talk to authors because very often you're an established author, so you know your value in a lot of ways, but often it takes like muscle memory to practice asking questions, asking for more, because very often you're on your own writing all the time and you don't know that you have the ability to go out and get a better deal, or you're nervous about asking because you don't want to lose something. And I hate to say this, but for women especially, we say yes to the first offer, and don't ever say yes to the first offer is a bit of advice I want to give out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for being with us today. This is Lana McAra. See you next time.
Thank you for tuning into the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana McAra, where we share tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Remember to visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Fiction Writers Podcast.